He didn't ask where my daughter wanted to travel for our honeymoon. He didn't ask what her favorite song was. He didn't ask anything that sounded like love. He asked one thing, over and over and over. Where exactly does your property stop? And by the fifth time he asked, standing at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, staring past my meadow like he owned the view, my stomach turned, because I realized my daughter wasn't his future, my land was. If you've ever had someone smile in your face while quietly measuring what they could take from you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because this story starts with one innocent question and ends with a wedding ceremony that turned into a police scene. And the man who thought he was about to inherit a ranch found out what happens when you try to play a father who's already lost too much. My name is Jack Caldwell. I live on a ranch in Colorado, just over 200 acres of land my wife and I bought decades ago when it was basically scrubland and stubborn dreams. Back then, nobody wanted this place. The closest city life was a long drive away. The land wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, rough, honest. My wife, Sarah, loved it instantly. Sarah wasn't the type of woman who wanted shiny things. She wanted life to grow in the ground. She wanted mornings that smelled like pine and coffee. She wanted a garden, not jewelry. We bought the ranch in the mid-90s for what would now be considered pocket change. We didn't come from money. We scraped and saved, the kind of saving that means saying no so many times you stop noticing. We built a life here. We raised our daughter, Emily, here. Emily grew up running barefoot across the grass, helping Sarah plant the garden that still blooms wild every spring. There's a particular kind of childhood you get on a ranch, one where the sky is bigger than your worries and the work teaches you dignity. Sarah died 3 years ago. Cancer. Fast. Cruel. Unfair. One year we were planting a new patch of roses. The next year I was sitting in a quiet house listening to the refrigerator hum like it was the only thing still alive. After she died, Emily checked on me every weekend. Sometimes she'd bring groceries. Sometimes she'd bring stories from her life in the city. Sometimes she'd sit with me in silence, which is a rare kind of love. I didn't ask for much. I didn't want to be the kind of father who clung. But grief can turn a big home into something hollow. Emily worried I was lonely, and that's why when she told me she'd met someone, I felt relief. His name was Brandon Hayes, 33, clean-cut, well-dressed without looking flashy, worked as an investment advisor in Denver. The first time I met him was Thanksgiving, 6 months ago. He showed up with a bottle of wine and perfect manners. He complimented Sarah's old recipes like he'd studied them. He asked about the ranch like he respected it. He shook my hand and looked me in the eyes when he spoke. That's something people don't do as much anymore, and it's easy to mistake it for sincerity. Brandon seemed like the kind of man a father wants for his daughter. Stable, responsible, polite. Maybe too polite. But I wanted to believe it. Emily deserved happiness. She'd had a messy relationship before, one of those that leaves you doubting your own judgment. So when Brandon proposed after only 4 months of dating at some fancy restaurant in Denver, Emily called me breathless with excitement. "Dad, he asked and I said yes." I said what fathers say. "Congratulations, sweetheart, I'm happy for you." But while Emily talked about venues and flowers, my mind kept circling something I didn't fully understand yet, because Brandon had already started asking questions. Not about Emily, about the land. The first time it happened so casually I almost missed it. Brandon was standing at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, staring past my meadow like he owned the view. "Where exactly does your property stop?" he asked, like he was asking where I bought my curtains. I shrugged. "The trees on the west side mark the boundary." He nodded, smiling, and changed the subject. The second time, he asked again, this time while we were walking to perimeter fence. "How far back does your land actually go?" he said, squinting into the distance. I assumed curiosity. City boys come out here and they see space and they can't process it. They treat acreage like it's a magic trick. But the fifth time he asked, my gut twisted. Because I spent 40 years as an engineer. Engineering taught me something I trust more than charm: patterns. And Brandon's pattern was simple. When he visited, he always found a way to bring the conversation back to boundaries, acreage, parcels, access, lines. Emily laughed it off. "He's just interested in ranch life, Dad. You know how city guys are." And I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't ignore how often he asked. The wedding was set for late September, right here on the ranch. Emily wanted to get married where Sarah would have loved. She'd already hired a planner, booked catering, sent out invitations to around 200 people. Brandon was involved in everything. He smiled through planning calls. He offered to help set up chairs. He suggested we open up the ceremony area. One Saturday in July, Brandon stood with me near the west edge. "You know, Jack," he said, "we could really expand the ceremony space if we cleared those trees along the western edge." I looked at him. "Those trees mark the property boundary." He nodded. "Right, but how far back does your land actually go?" There it was again. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It sounded like calculation. That night, after they left, I went into my study and pulled out the property deed. 215 acres, purchased for $80,000 in 1994. I stared at the numbers like they were a confession, because the land wasn't just land anymore. Denver had sprawled outward over the years. Developers were circling. Offers had come in, big ones. 4 million, 5 million, maybe more with development rights. I never told Emily the exact value. Not because I didn't trust her, because money changes people, even good people. Sarah's wealthy cousins tore each other apart over inheritances. I watched love turn into entitlement. Sarah and I made a decision years ago. We'd live modestly, quietly, and raise Emily normal. I drove an old truck, wore jeans and flannel, fixed things myself. And here's another piece Emily didn't know. The ranch was the visible part. The rest sat quietly. During my engineering career, I invented a small component used in industrial refrigeration systems. Nothing glamorous, but the royalties had flowed for 25 years. Between patents and investments, I had more than people assumed. I had just over 8 million in assets. I didn't talk about it. I didn't flash it. Because real wealth isn't what you show, it's what you protect. And now, Brandon's questions felt less like curiosity and more like a man measuring a safe. The next morning, I called my attorney, Diane Parker. "I need you to look into someone," I told her. A pause. "Jack, is this about Emily's fiancé?" "Just a precaution," I said. Diane sighed, the kind of sigh that says she's seen this movie before. "I'll have someone run a background check, but Jack, if you have concerns, you should talk to Emily." "Not yet," I said, "because if I was wrong, if I accused her fiancé without proof, I could destroy her happiness over a feeling, and fathers make mistakes that way." But I also knew something else. My gut had been right too many times in life to ignore it now. 3 days later, Diane called. "Jack, we need to meet." Not on the phone. That made my stomach drop. I drove to her office in Boulder. She closed the door and handed me a folder. "Brandon Hayes is exactly who he says he is. Licensed, works for a financial firm in Denver. Clean record, no criminal history." For 1 second, relief tried to wash through me. Then Diane flipped to another page. "But, there's always a but. He's been engaged twice before," she said. I felt my hands tighten on the folder. Both times to women from wealthy families. Both engagements ended abruptly. I stared at her. "After he gained access to family financial information," Diane added quietly. "No lawsuits, no allegations, nothing official, just timing." Diane leaned back. "These families don't sue, Jack. They pay to make problems disappear quietly." She told me the names. A tech CEO's daughter. Engagement lasted 5 months. Ended right after Brandon attended a family meeting about estate planning. A real estate developer's daughter. Engagement lasted 4 months. Ended right after her father revised his will. One father admitted off the record that Brandon asked very specific questions about inheritance structures and property transfers. I felt sick. "What about Emily?" I asked. Diane frowned. "Emily doesn't have major assets of her own. She makes good money in marketing, but nothing that would interest someone like Brandon." Then Diane's eyes sharpened.
But Brandon thinks Emily stands to inherit this ranch, and he doesn't know the actual value. He might be gambling on future assets. I went cold. Or worse, he'd researched me and knew more than he was letting on. Diane's voice softened. I recommend you talk to Emily. I shook my head, not without proof, because Emily was happy, and happy people don't want to hear warnings. They hear them as attacks. So I waited, and Brandon gave me exactly what I needed. That weekend, Brandon came by to help with wedding setup. He parked his Audi in my driveway like it belonged there and walked up to the porch where I was sitting. Jack, you got a minute? He said, all warm smiles. Sure, I said. He sat down, leaning forward like we were having a man-to-man talk. Look, I know this might be sensitive, he began, but Emily and I have been talking about our future. Finances, planning, responsible adult stuff. He cracked. I'm an investment advisor, so I can't help myself. My stomach tightened.
Then he said it. Have you thought about estate planning, making sure everything is set up properly for Emily? My blood went cold, but I kept my face neutral. I have a will. That's great, he said quickly, but with a property like this, you might want to consider a trust, more tax efficient. He smiled. I'd be happy to help, no charge. I mean, I'm going to be family. Then he pushed further. And at your age, Jack, you should think about long-term care planning. What if something happens? Who's going to manage this place? There it was. Same script, same play. Plant the seed, offer help, get access. Because once you have access, you don't need love. You just need paperwork. I smiled slowly. You make a good point, I said. Tell you what, why don't we sit down next week? You can explain all these strategies. Brandon's eyes lit up. Absolutely, he said. I'll bring some materials. After he left, I called Diane. He just asked about estate planning and long-term care, I said. He's positioning. Diane went quiet. Jack, I need proof, I said. Real proof. Diane hesitated. I know someone, she said finally. Private investigator, very discreet. Hire them, I said, because if Brandon was playing chess with my family, I was going to stop being the pawn. The investigator's name was Renee Cole. Small woman, sharp eyes, calm voice. The kind of person who doesn't waste words because she doesn't waste attention. Within a week, Renee had patterns. Brandon's meetings, his contacts, his routines. Then one Tuesday evening in August, Renee called. Mr. Caldwell, she said, you need to hear this. She explained she had audio from Brandon's car. I sat in my study alone, fingers stiff as I pressed play. Brandon's voice came through, casual, cocky. Yeah, I'm at the ranch again, playing the beautiful son-in-law. This old man has no idea. Another voice, male, laughing. You sure about the value? Brandon, I've checked county records 3 times, 215 acres, bought it for peanuts. With Denver expanding, we're talking minimum $4 million. The other man whistled. And the old man? Brandon, he's gotta be loaded. Look at this place, free and clear, lives alone, no debt. He's probably sitting on investments too. Then Brandon said the sentence that made my skin prickle. The daughter has no clue. She thinks daddy's just some middle-class retiree. The other man, so what's the play? Brandon, I marry Emily in September. Spend the first year being perfect, devoted husband, devoted son-in-law. Get him to trust me. Maybe get financial power of attorney under the guise of helping out. My heart thumped so hard I felt it in my ears. Brandon continued. Old guy lives alone. Who knows what could happen? A fall, an accident, cognitive decline. Before you know it, he's in a facility. I'm managing affairs. Emily inherits. We'll be divorced before she figures it out, and I'll take my half in settlement. The other man laughed. You're a cold bastard. Brandon, I'm practical. Then, chillingly, this one's perfect. Small-town guy, no sophistication about protecting assets. It's like he's asking to be taken. I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, with rage. Because I could handle someone trying to trick me. But this wasn't just a con. This was my daughter, my wife's memory, my home. And Brandon was joking about accidents like human life was a line item. I called Diane and Renee for an emergency meeting.
I have proof, I said. Diane listened to the recording twice. This is criminal conspiracy, she said. We can go to the police. I nodded. We will. But Emily, Diane hesitated. I swallowed. She won't believe me without hearing it herself, I said. Renee raised an eyebrow. What do you want to do? I stared at the ranch outside my window, the land Sarah loved. I want to expose him where he can't spin it, I said. At the wedding. Diane blinked. Jack, 200 guests? Exactly, I said. 200 witnesses. And I want Emily to hear it, not from me, from him. So we planned. For 2 weeks, I played the role Brandon expected, the trusting future father-in-law. I scheduled a sit-down meeting with him in my study to discuss estate planning. He arrived with a briefcase full of forms, confident. Okay, Jack, he said, laying papers on my desk. This power of attorney form will let me help manage things if you ever need it. Then he tapped another. And this one updates your will, establishes a trust with Emily as the beneficiary. He smiled. But with me as trustee, so everything is handled properly. I pretended to read, slow and thoughtful. And this helps with taxes? I asked. Absolutely, Brandon said quickly. You could save tens of thousands. I nodded like I was impressed. Then I asked the question that baited him. You keep asking about the property boundaries. Why is that? Brandon didn't miss a beat. Just thinking long term, he said smoothly. If Emily inherits, we might want to sell parcels, keep the house and a few acres. He leaned in slightly. No point holding land you won't use. We. He said we like it was inevitable. As her husband, he added, I'd want to help her make smart financial decisions. I smiled politely like he'd said something noble. Of course, I said, family helps family. He left that day believing he'd planted his hooks, and I let him believe it, because the most dangerous part of a trap is convincing the prey it's safe. A week before the wedding, Emily noticed I was distracted. Dad, are you okay? She asked, touching my arm gently. I felt my throat tighten. Just thinking about your mother, I said. Emily hugged me, her cheek against my shoulder. I miss her too, she whispered, but I think she'd be happy. Brandon's wonderful. I wanted to tell her everything right there, but I didn't, because if I told her, part of her would always wonder if I manipulated it. She needed to see it herself. So I lied. I'm sure she would be, I said, hating myself for it. The day before the wedding, Brandon's friend arrived, Cole Bennett, the voice from the recording. I recognized him instantly from Renee's photos. Cole wasn't subtle. He had the swagger of someone who thought consequences were for other people. At rehearsal dinner, Brandon and Cole laughed together like men who believed they were already paid. Brandon gave a toast. To Jack, who welcomed me into his family, and to Emily, who made me the luckiest man alive. Tomorrow is going to be perfect. Everyone clapped. I raised my glass. I smiled, because tomorrow would be perfect, just not for him. The wedding day was beautiful. Colorado September sunshine, aspen leaves turning gold, mountains sharp against a sky blue it looked painted. Sarah would have loved it. Guests filled folding chairs on our lawn. Emily's planner had decorated an arbor with late summer flowers. Emily walked towards me, radiant, wearing her mother's pearls. My chest tightened. I offered my arm. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held me. I love you, Dad, she whispered. I love you too, sweetheart, always. We walked down the makeshift aisle. Brandon stood at the altar, perfect tuxedo, perfect smile. The officiant began talking about love and commitment, and I watched Brandon's face, because I wasn't watching a groom. I was watching a predator pretending to be human. Then, right before vows, Emily's hand moved to her bouquet. She pulled out a small folded paper and passed it to me. Her eyes locked in mine, wet, terrified. I unfolded it. 3 words in her handwriting. Dad, help me. Everything inside me froze. I looked at her. She was staring at Brandon, face pale like all the blood left it. And I realized she knew. I stood. Stop, I said. Stop the ceremony. A wave of murmurs swept the crowd. Brandon turned sharply. Jack, what? I kept my voice calm. Emily, what's wrong? Emily took a shaky breath. The words came out fast, like she couldn't hold them anymore. I heard him, she said. Last night I went to his hotel room to surprise him, and I heard him talking to Cole about how he was going to... Her voice cracked. She swallowed. You said you were going to make sure my dad had an accident after we were married. Brandon's face flushed. Emily, you're being ridiculous. Emily shook her head, tears spilling. You said once you had power of attorney, it would be easy. A collective gasp tore through the guests. Brandon's smile vanished completely. Emily, this is wedding day nerves. You're hysterical. He grabbed her arm. That's when two men moved fast. The county sheriff and his deputy, friends of mine, rose from the audience. In seconds, Brandon's arms were pinned behind his back. Brandon fought, face twisting. This is insane. This is false. Jack is framing me. The sheriff's voice was cold. Brandon Hayes, you're being detained for conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiracy to commit violence. Cole bolted. He ran towards the driveway, but Renee was already there. She tackled him like she'd been waiting all day, because she had. The next hour was chaos. Guests murmuring, some crying, some recording on phones, statements being taken, Brandon shouting about lawsuits, Emily shaking like her body couldn't catch up with what happened. Diane arrived with folders, recordings, documentation, evidence. The ranch turned from wedding venue into an active investigation scene. Eventually, police took Brandon and Cole away. The guests dispersed slowly, like people leaving a movie they couldn't believe was real. The caterers packed up untouched dinner, and the sun kept shining, indifferent. Emily and I sat on the porch steps in our formal clothes. The mountains turned orange in the distance. Emily's voice was small.
I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered. I should have told you sooner. I looked at her. She swallowed. I've known for 2 days. My chest tightened. You've known? I asked softly. She nodded, wiping tears. I heard them talking. I just froze. I didn't want it to be real. She stared at her hands. I kept thinking maybe I misunderstood. Maybe there was an explanation. She laughed once, broken. So I kept going with everything. Like if I just pretended hard enough, it would be normal. I put my arm around her. And the note? I asked. Why wait until the last second? Emily's voice shook. Because I was scared. What if I was wrong? What if I ruined my wedding over a misunderstanding? She looked up at me, eyes swollen. But standing there, about to say I do, I realized I couldn't. I couldn't marry someone I didn't trust. So I wrote the note, she whispered, and I prayed you'd understand. I held her close. I do understand, I said quietly, and then I told her the truth. I suspected for months, I admitted. I had him investigated. Emily's eyes widened. You knew? I didn't know, I corrected. I suspected, and I got proof. I told her about the recording, about the plan, about the power of attorney forms. Emily stared at me like her mind was trying to reassemble itself. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Because that's the hardest question. I took a breath. Because you wouldn't have believed me, I said gently. You would have thought I was being controlling, that I didn't trust your judgment. You needed to discover it yourself, I said. Come to your own conclusion. I was just there to catch you when you did. Emily's face crumpled. I feel so stupid, she whispered. I shook my head. You're not stupid. You're someone who believes the best in people. That's a good quality, even when people don't deserve it. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in silence while the sky turned purple. 11. Dad, how rich are you? After a while, Emily spoke again. Dad? Yeah? She hesitated. How rich are you? I laughed softly, half amused, half exhausted. Why do you want to know? Because Brandon kept saying you were loaded, she said. I always thought we were comfortable but normal. I stared out at the land Sarah loved. Then I told her. We bought this ranch for $80,000 in the 90s, I said.
It's worth around $4 million now, maybe more. Emily blinked, and I exhaled. I also hold patents for my engineering work, royalties, investments. Total assets around $8 million. Emily's jaw dropped. $8 million, and you drive that old truck and wear clothes from Walmart? I smiled faintly. Money doesn't impress me, I said. Your mother and I grew up poor. We watched what money did to families. We decided to live modestly, enjoy what we had. I wanted you to grow up normal, I said, not as a rich kid who thinks she's better than everyone else. Emily's eyes filled. And my inheritance? I put it in a trust years ago, I said, structured so no spouse can touch it without your explicit consent. Emily went quiet. Then she whispered, I wish Mom was here. My throat tightened. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. 3 months later, Brandon and Cole were charged. Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted financial exploitation, and more. Brandon took a plea deal, 5 years probation, full restitution for investigation costs, and permanent ban from working in financial services. Cole got 2 years. Emily moved back to the ranch for a while, not because she was weak, because betrayal leaves your nervous system scrambled. She started therapy. She grieved the version of herself that trusted so easily. Slowly, she rebuilt. Eventually, she dated again. More careful now. Sadder, maybe, but wiser. And me? I stayed here, still driving my old truck, still wearing flannel. But I made one change. I expanded Sarah's garden, planted new roses, added a stone bench with her name engraved. Some evenings, Emily and I sat there watching the sunset, and I told her stories about her mother, about a woman who believed in buying land instead of fancy cars, in planting gardens instead of showing off jewelry, in building a life instead of maintaining an image. One evening, Emily asked, Dad, do you ever regret not being more open about the money? If I'd known, maybe I would have been more suspicious of Brandon. I thought about it. Then I shook my head. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe you'd attract more Brandons, wondering if everyone who showed interest was after your inheritance. I looked at Sarah's garden. The way we did it, you got to be yourself. You got to make choices for love. And when things went wrong, I turned to Emily. You had the strength to ask for help. That's worth more than any amount of money. Emily leaned against me. I love you, Dad. I kissed the top of her head. I love you too, sweetheart. The sun dropped behind the mountains. The sky turned orange and purple. A bird called somewhere in the meadow. And Sarah's garden bloomed, wild and beautiful. Money can't buy moments like this, but it can buy the security to enjoy them without fear. That's the real value of wealth, not what it displays, what it protects. And I'd protect my daughter with every dollar I had, as long as I lived. The revenge wasn't yelling. It wasn't drama for drama's sake. It was a father refusing to let a predator paperwork his way into control, and a daughter choosing truth at the last second with a room full of witnesses. Sometimes the most dangerous people don't look dangerous. They look helpful, polished, responsible. But love doesn't ask for power of attorney, and a good family doesn't have to be purchased with trust documents. If this story made your stomach drop, hit like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, if your child's fiancé kept asking about your property and inheritance, would you ignore it or investigate? And if you've ever had to protect your peace from someone smiling in your face, you're not paranoid, you're awake.